when I first started doing my research, one of the books I came across is called Frameless Art by Rudolf Ardland. He's a Gestalt psychologist who wrote this book, Frameless Art, in 1932, 1934. I used it in film school, and then when I was on my fellowship, I picked it up again and started reading it. And what startled me, as you can see, I've read it a lot, is that he's a Gestalt psychologist trying to think of the big picture and the likes of it. This book has been continuously in publication through today, so I think it's almost 80 years now. And let me show you specifically one quote. It's the starting point here. So this is page 74. Frame is absolute essential. The decorative qualities of a picture are to be displayed, but can only consider the filling of the canvas, the allotment of space, and so forth, if there are definite limits to act as a framework for the pictorial design. That's pretty basic and straightforward, isn't it? And here I am trying to think about frameless space, and I come across these quotes. And on the opposite page, it has this quote, which says, nevertheless, the greater the surface of projection, and clearly last night was a huge projection surface, the more difficult it is to organize the picture meaningfully. The temptation to increase the size of the screen goes with the desire for colored, stereoscopic, and sound film. This was written just as sound film was coming online. It's the wish of people who do not know the artistic effect is bound up with the limitations of the medium and who want quantity rather than quality. They will want to keep on getting nearer to nature and do not realize that they are thereby making it increasingly difficult for film to be art. And since we're all here as artists, I put that context up there because, yes, indeed, we have a real problem that we're dealing with. It's not something that's just hard to do. This is really, in the history of framing, frames have always been really useful. Unfortunately, Arnheim also wrote an interesting book called The Power of the Center, which I found a few years later, and I'm going to show you the chapter headings here, because the chapter headings actually kind of helps you. Two spatial systems, eccentric and centric, centers and their rivals. He talks about vectors, the viewer as the center, which is obviously what we all become here with the frameless space, limits and frames, time. So what's really interesting to me is that image is interpretable. Right? I mean, all of that image, it's me standing here, and I'm in a screen. It's a newscaster, it's a medium shot of everybody along the way, and we're actually in our brains putting all this around the edge. But in fact, we have the whole image now as a frame. And what's startling these days is that technology allows us to actually do this. And we've all seen this stack of frames, right? And all of a sudden, we still interpret what the image is because we've all gotten so habituated to the frame around things. I point that out to you because we all bring in with us this language of framing. And, you know, I mean, here it is right here. Here's the frame itself. Our frame. And we still can interpret that, and we can actually put distance in and put somebody in here like that. And what this is a completely two-dimensional flat surface, and now we've got a certain amount of perspective in there. And one of the challenges, right from the get-go, in all this kind of dome space, if you don't have 3D, is that the image is going to be caught in the screen surface itself. Annealed is the word I've heard. It literally is trapped inside the screen surface, trying to get forward. And so as something gets bigger as it comes forward to you, if it was in 3D, it would walk out into the room. But if it's in a screen surface, it's just going to grow bigger. And it grows bigger in a factor of 4. If you move distance forward one distance, the image is 4 times as big. And so with people in particular, which is part of what we're trying to deal with here, as somebody comes forward in an image, you can see the image and think about it. You've seen it often in a movie. They come forward and they get bigger. But what's going to happen here is they're going to get giant because there's no frame of reference. They're not scaled to the frame. Everybody got that? It's not scaled to the frame. And I have found, and what part of the experiments are to find out what happens when we experience people at different kinds of scale, among other things. Because we still have, most surfaces are 3D. I've seen there's been one Omnimax dome-shaped 3D film made in 1989 for the World's Fair in Japan. It was called Solido. Currently it's running at Futuroscope in France, which is 90 miles west of Paris. They bought the system and there. It's the only 3D version. Now, let me tell you about 3D. So if this is going to be 3D and it's supposed to come forward, everybody draw a pyramid from the corners to your eye. Okay, everybody's got that pyramid? That's all the image can be if it's going to come off the screen. If I move to you, I have to stay inside the pyramid. Does everybody understand that?
Yeah.
I can't go like this in 3D. I can't come forward like this because I moved out of everybody's pyramid. And that's the issue when you have any kind of something trying to come forward off of the 2D surface. The dome allows you to be kind of inside of it, but you're still going to have people trapped in the screen surface. So the puzzle with people is, do we relate to people if they become different sizes? Does that make sense, everybody? So you put a bunch of people on the screen, and I'll show you. And I want to show you now what happens if you do that. So there's an IMAX film called Titanic, And they did, I think, 17 dives with the IMAX camera in a submersible, and they shot the boat underwater. It was before the movie feature came out. It's fabulous. And then they recreated the divers in a dome. It was 3 Russians, and they built the dome. The dome was about as big as this screen, and they shot the camera. They had these 3 actors, these guys, the real guys were there, doing all their stuff. And when you saw the movie, what you saw on the IMAX screen were little tiny pictures of boats and great huge pictures of close-ups of people. And I got to see it inside of a screen once on an HD player, and it was like, what a wonderful movie. You see the people talking, and you see the boat, you see the people. It was so all constructed to the frame that it made complete sense. When you saw it inside the IMAX screen, it was gigantic heads, and the eyes were so big you couldn't see them without looking back and forth. And they were leaning forward. There's one where the guy actually leans through forward, it goes like that, and he makes a face. And I'll have to invade personal space to show you. It was like, you know, and there's this wonderful thing about how we get inside a personal space in the movies, people's personal space. And how do you do that in this big screen surface? That's a puzzle I've been trying. I don't have the answer for it, and I'm looking forward to what some of the solutions are we come up with. So along that line, I was sitting at, let me show you what I think might be a better size. Look at that, there's real life size to size. Look at the relationship to the screen surface. Pretty interesting, huh? This has a simple sample. Books out, and I want to show you parts of a SIGGRAPH talk I gave, a toolbox, and this is all print coming up. So here's the issue I talked about this brief last night. All the production tools, the storyboard, the sketches, the cameras, the desktop computer, all have frames. So everything we deal with while we're making the piece has a frame around it. So we're going to be looking through cameras today and all that sort of thing. So how do you deal with that and remember that it's never for a frame space? So the audience is inside the frame, and we as experts doing the work, and our crews and audiences are habituated to using frames. And how do we get our crews to work through the frames, and how do we get everybody to be immersed inside of this experience? I wear my hat backwards like this all the time. I discovered when I frame a shot, instead of going like this, or whatever way we do it these days, I first watched an OmniMax film and I went like that, and I said, oh, there's the shot. That's interesting, because I can move my head around. And then one day, I was yawning on the set, and I went like that. And I said, oh, and there's the frame line. That's the bottom frame of the screen. That's how I frame a shot. And then my crew gets out the binoculars and looks around to make sure there isn't any little artifact. This is going to have so much detail way off in the background. Right, Peter? There's detail out there that you never thought you were going to see when it gets on any kind of bigger exposure space. And so this is for me how to frame, and I use this to show you how to get people to actually get together. The second part of this is that all the production tools show the images inside the frame, which is 180 degrees the opposite of the experience of the audience. I call it the 180-degree rule, which is that if there's any experience that I would have done in my long time use of making framed movies, if I think of the exact opposite thing to do, it's likely the right solution. How's that sound? You know, it's going to be a 2-shot, it's a big shot with just 2 people down the middle of it. I also made a viewfinder. This is a $29 wide-angle extender lens. And I'm going to see the piece of tape on the front? I'm going to pass it around. Piece of tape is the bottom frame length. So when you look through it, you see that little spot. And to shoot an IMAX, I'm going to actually tilt it about like this much. This room is much too small to shoot anything in. But I found that I can't see a whole shot because I have to go like that and it's scanning around. Whereas this allows me to look out into the corners and you see, here's the camera, here's the shot.